Hey, this is Brother Samuel from Straight Cut Ministries again. This time I want to share a video of another brother that I found off of Bitchute. And it's really good. And it talks about the dangers of drugs and alcohol. Specifically, cannabis, marijuana, alcohol. And this is really crucial topic to talk about. Especially, there's a lot of believers in the world today that think it's okay to do some of these things, and they're unknowingly inviting demonic activity to come into their life. So check the video out and tell me what you think. Put a comment in the description below. Please like and subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything, and it'll help me out. God bless you. I hope you enjoyed the video.
Few people realize that Aleister Crowley is not only the father of modern Satanism, but the father of modern culture as well. Crowley, whose house overlooked Loch Ness and was bought by guitarist Jimmy Page, has for good reason also been called the other Loch Ness Monster. Crowley, who in his book Magic had admitted to sacrificing hundreds of children to Satan, was run out of Italy and called by the press of his day the wickedest man on earth. Crowley claimed that a demonic spirit he later identified as Satan himself dictated a book to him in 1904 called the Book of the Law. Under the heading The Law of Thelema, the Book of the Law declares, "This book lays down a simple code of conduct. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is a law, love under will. There is no law beyond do what thou wilt." Echoing Satan's arrogant boast, "I will exalt my throne above the stars of God," the book centers around the imposition of satanic self-will in defiance of divine will. Aleister Crowley, elaborating on the satanic doctrine of do what thou wilt, declared, quote, "I say today, to hell with Christianity. I will build me a new heaven and a new earth. I want blasphemy, murder, rape, revolution, anything bad, etc." Aleister Crowley has been called the unsung hero of the 1960s and the father of the New Age movement. Time magazine, on their front page article on the New Age movement, declares that they don't know where the term came from or where the movement is going. But the evidence is all so clear for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. In Crowley's book, The Book of the Law, the spirit of Satan who channeled through him wrote of the coming of the new eon, a transliteration of the Greek word ionis for age. The book declares how this new eon of Horus will develop, how the child will grow up. These are for us to determine, growing up ourselves in the way of the law of Thelema under the enlightened guidance of the Master Therion. And just who is a Master Therion that is to guide the new age? At the end of the book, we discover that Therion equals 666, the number of the Antichrist, the one whom the Bible calls the man of lawlessness, the man of sin, who is to reign during the last period of history, in the tribulation period. A large part of Satan's plan through Crowley was to bring in a drug revolution and to open up the masses to the demonic spirit world. Crowley's former disciple and secretary, Israel Regardie, stated, quote, "Crowley became an expert at a dozen or so varieties of Hindu and Buddhist yoga. He experimented with more drugs more frequently than anybody in the West before the neurological revolution of the 1960s. In the Book of the Law, the satanic spirit that channeled through Aleister Crowley merely echoes the satanic strains from the Garden of Eden so many years ago. He states, quote, "I am the snake that giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory and stir the hearts of men with drunkenness to worship me, take wine and strange drugs." Crowley interpreted this in his book Diary of a Drug Fiend to mean, quote, "Things like heroin and alcohol may be and should be used for the purpose of worshiping, that is, entering into communion with the snake that giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory." Aleister Crowley's twisted poetry glorified drugs as a door to the demonic. He wrote, quote, "Stab your demoniac smile to my brain, soak me in cognac, love and cocaine, heart on my heart, come out of the rain, let's have another go of cocaine, always go on till you have to stop, let's have another sniff over the top." Robert Anton Wilson, who played a leading role in the counterculture revolution of the 1960s, stated in his book, Sex and Drugs, quote, "Crowley played a decided role in developing the philosophy or mystique of the drug revolution."
All right, so I have it on screen right here. The Book of the Law. This was Aleister Crowley's it's the most quoted, the most pervasive, the most influential work of all satanic magic, thought, and philosophy that there is. And what it really comes down to is do whatever you want as long as you love whatever that means. It's your definition of love. So if you're a pedophile and you think that, loving little kids is yeah, you want to do what you want, it's love, it's all good. Anything goes as long as you love, but that's the pseudo science of it, because everybody has a different definition of love, especially when you're totally jacked, whacked out of your mind with drugs, which is something that Aleister Crowley was obsessed with. And before I get to that, I remember how I mentioned that Aleister Crowley has infiltrated all of modern Hollywood and the music industry. This is actually the cover of a Christian band, so-called Christian band called Emery, 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 and it's directly, this is the album cover, and they say, "We do what we want." That's just how it's been, man. Crowley took over and infiltrated. His teachings totally annihilated the West from a moral decay standpoint. So what I'm going to show you now is his book, Diary of a Drug Fiend. Now, if you just look at the cover, it looks really weird. There's like smoke everywhere. It's probably some kind of ritual, but it looks like almost a dead person, or at least somebody that's passed out. Their arm is over here, their head is over here, but you can see their shoe and their leg is sticking out. And so there's it looks like a hookah or some kind of Middle Eastern, apparatus for smoking. And so Diary of a Drug Fiend is, you heard it quoted in that video I just played. I'm going to show you that actual same quote in more detail. But you might be asking yourself, why do you have the book of a Satanist? Why are you looking at this stuff? Well, remember, we're supposed to expose the works of darkness, but have no fellowship with them. Oftentimes people are like, "Oh, well, I don't think marijuana is bad, or I don't think this is bad, or this or that." Sometimes, if you want to get down to the bottom of something, you really have to dig deep, and you have to go all the way to the teachings of the actual people pushing the agenda. In this case, if you want to know what is evil, without a shadow of a doubt, you have to actually go and look at the teachings of the Satanist himself. And you'll know. Whatever they're teaching, do the opposite, pretty much. So if you want to know if something's evil or not, sometimes the true test is what is being taught by the enemy. So let me go skip all the way to page, and this is going to be page 364. And so what Diary of a Drug Fiend is, it's just a ton of him, like Aleister Crowley doing drugs, like a lot of drugs, and he just writes down all his experiences psychedelically. He literally just sits there and writes down all of his experiences. And he talks about all these apparitions, these spirits, these demons, all these things, and he talks to them. He writes down what they say, and it's disgusting, and it's an abomination, and it's something that I'm not even reading. I'm not going to spend time reading all this crap, but here's what I want to focus on, okay? This is from page 364. He says, "Let's get back to the words, to worship me." Okay, so this is at the very end of the book, and he's kind of summarizing everything that he's kind of talked about in this huge buffet of garbage and demonic witchcraft experiences and garbage, okay? At the very end of the book, he says, "Let's get back to the words, to worship me." And he says, "They mean that things like heroin and alcohol may and should be used for the purpose of worshiping, that is, entering into communion with the snake that giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory, which is the genius which lies in the core of every star. And every man and every woman is a star. The taking of a drug should be a carefully thought out and purposeful religious act." So did you catch what he's saying here? Things like heroin and alcohol should be used for the purpose of worshiping and entering into communion with the snake, the devil. But you know what he kind of misses? He doesn't say it the way it should be, is that it's not just entering into communion with the snake, but it's entering into communion with the demons that will enter your body and torment you and keep you from living your God-given purpose in this life. That is exactly what he's talking about there. And he admits it. Now, let's talk about it. Is alcohol evil? I talk to Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists. I talk to all kinds of people, and they're like, alcohol is totally evil. Or don't forget, Yeshua turned water into wine at the wedding in Cana, right? So is alcohol evil? But it is in fact drunkenness and losing control of your body that's evil, right? Heroin, you can't just have like LSD, heroin, DMT, dimethyl, whatever. I forget the name of it. Marijuana, heroin, all these drugs, cocaine. You can't just have a little dose and be okay. You'll lose control of your body. That's the biggest difference between alcohol and maybe tobacco, which I enjoy on occasion, alcohol anyway. I'll enjoy a little bit on occasion, have a little drink. But it's the drunkenness, it's the losing control of your body that enters you into communion with the snake. That's exactly what happened with me when I took a little chocolate, not understanding what was about to happen inside of my body. I would have never touched it if I would have known, man. So, let's take a look at one of the modern disciples of Aleister Crowley. One of the biggest disciples. He doesn't even know he's a disciple of Aleister Crowley, but he is absolutely, man. He is so hooked on weed. He is so hooked. Joe Rogan is got a huge platform. This video itself, it's got 1.2 million views. And it's just him smoking weed with Elon Musk. The original podcast itself with Elon Musk, the full interview, that's got millions of views.
Okay.
But the problem with Joe is that all of the younger generation, the martial arts crowd, he's got so much influence. So many people look up to Joe Rogan. I have even enjoyed Joe Rogan's podcast tremendously in the past.
First turned on to it by Charlie Murphy and then reignited by Dave Chappelle. You
have to understand how influential Joe Rogan is. Anyways, let's just take a look a little bit at what Joe is talking about when he talks about marijuana use on his show. But also, by the way, he has the biggest podcast, if I'm not mistaken. He has the biggest podcast on the internet. Okay, so Joe Rogan is not. He's not just a nobody. So let's see what one of Aleister Crowley's disciples is teaching. And I want to direct your attention to this interview that he did with Ben Shapiro. Now, why did this interview catch my eye so much? Because Ben Shapiro is an Orthodox Jew, actually. I don't know. Well, he grew up as an Orthodox Jew. I don't know if he's Reformed now. I don't follow him too much. I just know about him. He does conservative political commentary, which I find pretty interesting sometimes. But Ben Shapiro is an attorney. He's a podcaster. Like I said, he has his own show. And he wears the goofy, sorry, I don't mean to make fun of you guys in the audience, but he even says it himself, I wear a goofy hat, okay? So I'm not making fun of him. If you want to wear the Orthodox Jewish hat, I think that's cool. I don't totally understand why people do that, but anyways, he does it. And so he comes on Joe Rogan's show, and Joe Rogan wants to debate him about marijuana use. Now, this video itself, this is just a clip. It's not the entire interview with Ben Shapiro. Okay? This video clip itself has 7 million views. Almost 7.5 million views. So, again, it just shows you this platform that Joe Rogan has is just so influential. And I want you to see what Joe is teaching people. I want you to see how marijuana is being portrayed. And I want you to, I'm going to make some commentary here afterwards, but I really want you to understand why this is so dangerous. So just check out this clip.
I don't want to let this marijuana thing go just yet. One of the things that I wanted to bring up to you was this idea that if you're a religious person, don't you think that there's certain things that maybe God put here for us to consume, to change your perspective, to allow you to reach new levels of consciousness? Don't you think it's entirely possible that some of these things that are here, and I know you haven't experienced them, but they might literally have been put there by God? And there's some evidence to say that a lot of the texts from the Bible, that in particular, there was, I think it was the University of Tel Aviv, somewhere in Jerusalem, where these scholars were trying to decipher what it meant when Moses encountered the burning bush.
Right.
And they believe that it may have been the acacia tree, which is very rich in dimethyltryptamine, which is a psychedelic substance that the brain produces, and it's very common in plants. And they think that this might have been when he met God, and God was a burning bush, that this might have been some crude translation of them being involved in some sort of a psychedelic experience. Now, it sounds outlandish unless you've had that psychedelic experience. And when you have, you very well could think that you were in a conversation with God. This is on Earth. And this is something that may very well have been lost information, or this may very well have been rituals that people participated in to bring them closer together and to reinforce that sense of community that you do get from a church and you do get from a group of people that share moral beliefs and values. And there's real good discussion that a lot of these experiences that became these religious doctrines came from psychedelic experiences.
Okay, let's just pause him there for a second, because he's throwing two things at us in rapid fire succession. Number one, does God put things on earth? I mean, if it's here on earth, then it must be good, right? So with that logic, I should go out and eat rocks and use poison ivy for toilet paper. And, I mean, what else, right? There's a lot of things that are harmful in nature. Use cactus to rub on your body because it's supposed to be good for lotion. I don't know. Just something ridiculous. Just because God put something here on earth, like a poisonous mushroom, doesn't mean that it's good to eat, right? So that's a very flawed sort of thinking, but it's very common with the Rastafarians that promote and advocate for every herb being created in Genesis, and they use that to say that marijuana should be used. It's something that should be enjoyed. But then Rogan goes on to say that God is not real. Moses had a psychedelic experience with DMT and hallucinated. He had a hallucinogenic experience where he thought he was speaking with God. So blasphemous, man. So ridiculous. What Joe is saying is God is not real. God is a psychedelic experience. You should all have psychedelic experiences. That's what he's pushing. Let's see how Ben Shapiro responds to it, though, and I think you're going to be totally baffled at how he responds to this.
Now, as someone who's never experienced that before, I know this is probably a very strange thing to try to even wrap your head around. It is entirely alien until you experience it, but it might very well be religious.
I mean, I've heard that from other people who have used those kinds of drugs. I mean, Sam actually made this argument to me too about the use of psychedelics, and I mean, maybe. I mean,
God made apples.
Well, okay, so this argument, I will say, I'm not.
Oh my gosh, man! I gotta pause him there. Maybe. Are you freaking kidding me, man? So ridiculous. So ridiculous. This video alone has 7 million views. I think the original interview has like 10 million. So ridiculous. So spineless. Coward. Can't get on that show and say, God is real. Moses did not have a psychedelic experience, but with whatever fake, made-up, blasphemous story of acacia trees burning with, and they contain so much DMT that he just started tripping like he was on LSD or acid, like mushrooms, I mean. Like something ridiculous, like he just took a drug and that's why he saw God. Like, this should piss you off, man. This should make your blood boil. How ridiculous Ben Shapiro's response is when he says maybe. Just unbelievable. How spineless, how weak and pathetic people of faith have become when they're put on the hot seat and it's time to shine, baby. So ridiculous, man. Let's just keep listening and see what else Ben has to say.
Not super fond of the argument that God made something and therefore it's ours to use or I mean, like, I keep kosher, right? Like, God made pigs. I don't eat them. So, so I am not a huge fan of the argument that because something is here or because an urge is natural, therefore we ought to imbibe or therefore we ought to participate in a particular activity. You know, one of the things that I'm very big on, I'm a rationalist when it comes to religion, as much as you can be a rationalist with regard to religion, to the extent that I think that it's up to us to use our reasonable faculties to determine the proper use of things. So, which is why you shouldn't overuse drugs, even if you're going to use drugs, for example.
This is part of the problem of making things illegal. You make things illegal, then you really don't know what it is or how it affects the body or what's the right dose or the wrong dose. And then people get involved in these terrible situations where they're taking things and they're just guessing what it is.
There's truth to that, but it's also true that on a social level, I'm not talking about legal because we totally agree on the legal level. On the social level, there's a couple of things that are true of, for example, the Orthodox Jewish community. Low rates of addiction because people have that social fabric. They don't feel the necessity. Also, you know, as you say, substance use in moderation can actually be quite a good thing. So low rates of alcoholism in the Jewish community, and part of that is the fact that you are given Kiddush wine from the time you're a kid, right? I mean, you actually are
It's destigmatized.
Yeah, it's destigmatized. And the idea is that in its proper context, this could be a good thing.
Right.
So I'll admit, I don't know enough about the proper context of marijuana to know when it would be a quote-unquote good thing.
And that is why I decided to do this episode, man, because so many people out there, I was the same way. I thought, hey, you know what? No big deal, man. Hey, there's probably a dosage to marijuana. You could probably dose it, you know. You could probably take a little bit, be all right. It's probably good for some people. You can, you know, some people it might be good for pain. Some people it might be good for cancer. It might be good for this. It might be good for that. Hell no. Hell no. And there's just not enough education from a spiritually literate standpoint. There's not enough people talking about the dangers of this and what the literal father of modern Satanism taught about this topic. And so Ben Shapiro gives such a poor defense of the faith, but not just in front of anybody, in front of one of the biggest audiences in the entire internet and podcasting world. And truly, this is why the West, this is why our societies are in so much trouble. Now, I will give Ben credit where credit is due. I like what he had to say. Like, hey, I keep kosher. Just because God made something doesn't mean you should eat it. I don't eat pigs. Good on him. Like, that's great. That was really well said. But I guess he just wasn't ready. He just didn't know. He did not investigate what Ephesians 5:11 had to say, okay? Have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. What an opportunity to expose, right? That's why I encourage you to share this episode, share this podcast with people, because I will be covering things that you're not going to find anywhere else, ever, probably. I'm not trying to be all proud and boastful. It's just God's brought me through some very unique situations to be able to deliver the goods. Ephesians 6:10, finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil, the trickery of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand, my friend. Whew. Joe Rogan does not realize that he is being used as a vessel of the rulers of darkness and the principalities and the powers of this age. His podcast, the way he talks about psychedelic drugs, the way he promotes the use, the experimentation, the experience, the literal, that the Joe Rogan experience is literally him with the all-seeing eye in the middle of his head, like his logo for his podcast. I know I'm picking on Joe Rogan, by the way. Everybody in the media, like pop culture, they're all about drugs, but I'm picking on Joe a little bit here because he's so influential, and I've had so many people over the years listening to his stuff, and they're all super druggy. I even know one guy that's had a bad trip on mushrooms, and he almost killed himself. Because you're playing with fire when you're playing with drugs, man. People are playing with fire, and they don't know what the hell they're doing. And here's my take. Well, how come, you might be wondering, well, how come somebody like Joe Rogan doesn't commit suicide? And here's what I'll say. I think when demons enter a person, when people are demonically being used, when they're inhabited, I think some people are used as a vessel for evangelism, like Joe Rogan is, and I think some people are just marked for destruction. I think some people, the enemy just wants to use and abuse, have some fun with. And I mean, I hate to, it sounds pretty harsh, but from all my observations, that's kind of what I think is going on here. It's just a big game of souls, and how many people they can deceive, how many people they can kill for fun. And there's a lot of victims out there, and there's also evangelists. I have met witches in person before, and they are evangelists. The spirits use them to attract and bring in more people to the world of sorcery, of pharmakia, of drug use, okay? And so here's what I'll say, wrapping kind of up this whole talk. This podcast is for the wise of Daniel chapters 11 and 12. You understand the 70 Shabuah. You understand the timeline of God. And there's some specific things we're told about Matthew 24 that we're supposed to be paying attention to like crazy right now. We're supposed to be focusing like a laser beam on this stuff. And one of those things is Matthew 24. This is like the chapter right now that like this so relevant to our lives. It's so relevant. And Matthew 24:48 says, "But if that evil servant says in his heart, 'My master is delaying his coming,' and begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and at an hour that he is not aware of, and will cut him in two, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So, eating and drinking with the drunkards. You know what else we can throw in there? And it's the same spirit, it's the same essence and meaning in the text. Doing drugs with the psychedelic crowd. Doing drugs with those who are obsessed with hallucinogenics. Doing drugs to pass the time, losing control of your body like a drunkard. Okay? The master, Yeshua, is looking for a spotless bride right now, a bride that's ready for his coming, for his return. He's looking for people who are sober. I'm sorry, man, if you're hooked on weed, you're in trouble right now. If you're hooked on any substance that you know, you don't need me to tell you, the Holy Spirit's teaching you that it's something that is not edifying, it is dragging you down, it is causing you to be tormented, oppressed, have night terrors, have dreams and visions of death and hell and evil. If you know that you're being followed by demons, if you know your dwelling is haunted, if you have any perception, if you have scratches on your body, if you have something that's whispering things in your ear and it's not going away, it stays around you, you are totally not obeying what this verse is saying in Matthew 24:49. If you're taking drugs that are opening you up to this type of oppression, you must make yourself spotless. So here's what I'll do. For this episode, I have done something extremely special. I have put together a PDF. Okay? Instructions to cleanse your dwelling step by step. Okay? So I'm going to make this available. It's in the description right now of this video and of this podcast episode. You can also join my group on my Telegram. Join the group so that I can also talk with you if you need extra help, instructions, if you want somebody. And there's a lot of people in there, by the way, not just me, praying. Download the PDF though. There's going to be instructions to cleanse your dwelling. Okay, let's go ahead. I'm going to exit this and let's just go and take a look at it. Here I have instructions. I give a little backstory, but I give you scriptures, I give you guidelines, specific steps, and I teach you something that a lot of people don't talk about, man. Where should we be praying that these demons go? I pray that they go into the abyss. Get them the hell out of your life. And I show you what the abyss is. I show you how, like, the prayer that I've used so many times that's been so powerful in my life. I show you all these things and more. You can grab that, go ahead and download it totally for free. Join the group, and I'd love to pray for you. I'd love to experience God with you, just the way that I experience God. He's ready. He's knocking. So many people are going to be blessed by obedience, not just in the head knowledge of understanding certain things in the scriptures, but actually taking like these instructions that I put together, following them, letting the Holy Spirit teach you, but following these instructions that are totally based on Scripture and watching God work in your life. Man, there's something about applied Scripture, faith and works, action. There's something about that is so powerful. You're about to witness it if you haven't witnessed it before in your life. And yeah, I'm a little more on the charismatic side, man. Like, I've been through enough. I'm a very charismatic guy, if you want to call it that. I have charisma when it comes to this topic because I want to see God's people set free from demonic slavery. Okay? There's a couple things in life that are very sure. Death and taxes, right? We're slaves to the IRS. We're slaves to whatever, regulatory body that collects taxes in your country might be. But you know what? You don't have to be a slave to the demonic and the spiritual oppression. You don't have to be a slave. So I in the name of Yeshua, rise up and be set free right now. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Overcome Babylon. I hope you've learned, and hopefully this has been an eye-opener for you. This was a tremendous eye-opener for me when I started connecting all the dots. And stay tuned, more episodes on the way. Be blessed, and I will catch you next time. I hope you've been blessed by today's episode. If you could give me a like, drop a comment, share this content, or give me a 5-star rating, that would be great. And it would allow more people to hear this message. Whether you're watching on video sites like Rumble, Bitchute, Brighteon, or listening in on the podcast, I'd love to know your thoughts and feedback. Also, make sure to visit overcomebabylon.com for more articles, reports, and other great info that I don't always have time to cover here in the podcast. All right, that's all I have for now. I'll see you next time.